Welcome back to Blockchain Made Easy with Rohas Nagpal. This is the final episode to our Blockchain Made Easy series where we are talking a lot about how blockchains work, what are cryptocurrencies, and today we want to discuss a bit beyond cryptos. What are the applications of blockchain beyond cryptocurrencies? Welcome, Rohas. Nice to have you again.
My pleasure.
And we have Karn, obviously.
Great. Very excited, Rohas.
My pleasure.
Yes. So Rohas, we've learned how blockchain has made this whole democratized this whole currency minting process, right? Anybody can mint their own currency today, theoretically, right? So, but blockchain ka application is not just restricted to cryptocurrencies, right? So, what according to you are some of the top applications of blockchain in the non-crypto world?
Sure. So actually, my view on this may be a little contrary to what most people say. So I come from the world of federated blockchains. For many years, I've helped large institutions set up blockchain on non-financial use cases and non-crypto use cases. But if I was to be very honest, most of those use cases actually don't make sense to me. Like we hear a lot about using KYC as a use case on top of the blockchain.
Right.
Now, honestly, that doesn't make too much sense to me because KYC is data that you don't want everyone in the world to see. Because if
Right.
it's my KYC data, I should have a right to give permission about who can see it and who cannot. Now, the moment you say that, then how is the blockchain adding any value? The fundamental logic of blockchain is to decentralize and to make the data completely transparent. So anybody in the world can go on a blockchain explorer and have a look at every transaction of Bitcoin, Ethereum, whatever you want. But obviously that will never be allowed for KYC data. I don't want random people looking at my data. So what are we going to achieve by putting KYC data on a blockchain? First of all, it is not public data. It is controlled by few entities only. It is not like every user is creating his own data. So
Right.
the whole decentralization is not happening. So KYC doesn't make sense to me as a user.
Got it. And when you were talking about KYC, absolutely right that it will open up our private data maybe to the rest of the world in some shape or form, even if that's encrypted somehow. There is another application of blockchain that we were reading about that was around voting, right? Now, thinking from or taking, building on what you were saying about KYC, would it then be possible for people to see who we have voted for if it happens on a blockchain?
Excellent question. In fact, that is the biggest problem that I would say with trying to put voting on the blockchain. Because voting in a democracy is supposed to be confidential.
Correct.
Nobody should be able to see who I voted for.
Correct.
Because otherwise you can very easily, take revenge against some
Absolutely.
people, or you could know whom to target and all. So when we are putting voting data on top of the blockchain, it is completely killing the whole concept of democratic voting. Now, one way you could say is that, okay, everybody could be anonymized behind an address. But see, again, somebody has to issue that address. So there is going to be somebody which is going to know each and every individual citizen's details and what is the blockchain ID or address. So that kills the whole point. So no, voting on blockchain also does not make any sense to me. So what
So
people
basically-
remember is, why was blockchain invented? Okay. So
Right.
blockchain term started with the Bitcoin white paper. In that, whoever wrote it, we don't know the real people, they talked about pure electronic peer-to-peer cash system. That is what it was made for. It was never made for data. It was never made for KYC or voting. It was made that you should be able to create an asset on it, and that asset should be movable around the place. Then, of course, so what we call is smart asset lifecycle management. So on the Bitcoin blockchain, there was only one asset possible, which was Bitcoin itself. Then people built layer on top called colored coins or layer 2 solutions which came. Ethereum took the thing to the next level where it said, let's make money programmable. And you could create hundreds of thousands of tokens and each could have smart contracts and all that. But that's where I think the use cases end. We should only use blockchain for smart asset lifecycle management. You should be able to create a token or an asset which could be anything. An equity share, currency, crypto, no problem. But create an asset, transferring it, destroying it, escrowing it, sending, receiving, atomic, all that makes sense. But that is where the use cases should stop. Jabardasti, when we try to put in other things into it, it is like we have a hammer, but we don't have a solution. तो हम कहीं भी उसको ठोकते जाते हैं. And the proof is in the fact that most of the non-financial use cases are still in POC. मतलब 2015-16 से मैं सुन रहा हूँ, and till today they are running in POC stages because it doesn't make real business sense.
This is super interesting that they've still not been able to move beyond the proof of concept stage, and yeah, because we keep reading about blockchain's application into, say, supply chain management as well, but we could very well do it with the current tech that we have. I mean, why do we need blockchains specifically for that? What's your take on it?
We don't need it. So especially when there is, like, many times people say that we will put the tracking of food on it.
Yeah,
now
exactly.
Let's try to understand that use case. So let's say a shipment starts from China and is going all the way to the US. And on the way, you are tracking everything on the blockchain, temperature, pressure, maintained inside that, everything is done. Finally, it reaches you and you go to a shop and you scan it, the QR code on that particular food, and it shows you this life cycle. Now tell me, first of all, how many people will even check it? Secondly, those who check it, how are you giving them any assurance that this is more genuine than what could come from your private database? I mean, you look at the end customer, okay? End customer doesn't care. Like if you are using Paytm, have you ever called up Paytm and asked which database are you using? You don't care, right? You just want to make sure your money moves safely and fast. So similarly, as a customer, if I scan that QR code on the food, and whether the data comes from your private database or your blockchain, it makes no difference to me. So in that case, why are we putting the data on the blockchain? Who are we trying to solve? What problem are we solving?
Exactly.
A private database makes so much sense. Even when it is a group of entities, you could use a distributed database.
Right.
Blockchain doesn't make any sense unless it is going to be public, unless anybody in the world can come and see your transaction. That is the only time it makes sense.
The fact that blockchain as a concept was introduced with the Bitcoin white paper sort of also seals it, that is the first principal use case of the blockchain.
Correct.
Right, absolutely.
But yeah, cryptocurrency is one use case, but within the finance world, I'm guessing there might be other use cases.
Now that's a very, very interesting point. So in fact, I think the word cryptocurrency itself is a misnomer. We should not use it. That is why whenever I talk, I always just use crypto or crypto asset. Because जैसे you put in the word currency, everyone now thinks medium of exchange. But you know what? I think we discussed in the previous video that most of the cryptos today are not medium of exchange.
Correct.
And how do you find that out? You look at the volume by market cap ratio. Correct. And you will find that for Bitcoin and Ethereum and all, it is a very tiny number. Absolutely. But for things like Monero, it is higher, or for some, it is much higher. In fact, Litecoin is very high. The stable coins are very high. Their ratio is above 1.
Correct. USDT.
Yes, because a stable coin is actually a cryptocurrency. Its job is to function as a medium of exchange. Then there are the other cryptos like Bitcoin and Ethereum. So now let's take an example of Ethereum. What is the use case of Ethereum? The use case is to be used as the fuel for all transactions on the Ethereum platform. So whenever you're doing any smart contract, ETH is what becomes your fuel to prevent the network from getting scammed. Spam nahi ho jana chahiye. People shouldn't just push millions of entries because it's free. So ETH controls that. Then when you create a contract, you set a limit about how much you want to put gas value. So you'll be surprised to know that you decide the gas value when you create the contract. So you say ki isko minimum 21,000 units hona chahiye. And then in terms of GWEI, which is like 10 raised to the power minus 9 ETH, that many units are used. And sometimes if you have put more, but the consumption is less, that comes back to you. The gas comes back to you. So ETH actually has a very strong non-financial use case. The use case is to function as the petrol, fuel or gasoline of all the DeFi transactions happening on the platform. That's what ETH is supposed to do. So actually ETH you could say is a non-financial use case. It is to run that platform. So that has worked very well and it is so highly successful. Then you try to understand Bitcoin. It is now becoming a store of value. Again, uska ek alag use case ho gaya, but yes, that is quite financial. But specifically, one of my favorite projects is what we call as the BAT, or the Basic Attention Token, where it says that why can't we pay people money for watching ads?
Absolutely.
Pay people for their attention. So as per the white paper, human attention is one of the most important assets today. So how can I monetize someone for giving attention? And then how can I make sure that when this money flows? So today you have alternatives of Google and Facebook who are centralized advertising agency.
Right.
People like you and me create content there. Other people advertise, and the major chunk of the money goes to the platform. The bad guy said this doesn't make sense. The major chunk of the money should go to the content creator, and the platform should take as little as possible.
Correct.
So BAT makes a lot of sense to me.
Absolutely.
So I can download the Brave browser and I can start using it. And by the way, Brave is an excellent browser even if you don't use the bad cryptocurrency or the bad crypto. And it is a project made by the founder of JavaScript and Firefox.
Wow.
So I mean, he's like, he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah.
So that is one of the reasons I really like the BAT project.
And it makes so much sense, right? Just to simplify a bit what you explained, and this is something that we had brainstormed about in one of our read-on sessions as well, where we were talking about how there is this whole concentration of wealth, right? That has become a concern today. The economic divide that we see. BATs coming in, or even some other middlemen coming in who would democratize the advertising space itself, that would be a great leveling factor, right? Today, an HUL or a Marico or a Britannia pays millions of dollars to Google and Facebook to run ads, and at the end of the day, they are using our data, right? That is our resource. That data is our resource, and we are selling it for free. We are giving it up for free, as it is in the BAT white paper as well, right? And why shouldn't maybe we take 70% of what is being paid to these Facebooks and Googles of the world?
Correct.
And them keeping 30%? We have no problem in there being a middle person, right? So I think that this is one of the most unique use cases where you democratize wealth as well.
True. Quite true.
It's beautiful. It's like a capitalist solution to a socialist economy.
All content creators love when they hear about BAT, how it is actually going to help. Makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
But I want to understand how blockchain exactly is used in the whole idea that you spoke of, where
Of BAT?
we are
Okay.
the overall philosophy of blockchain, which is immutable data records or a ledger system. How is that specifically used in the concept that you just spoke of?
Sure. So when we talk about this asset management of blockchain, so what happens is when you're using this Brave browser, the money that you could earn, or when an advertiser is paying for an ad, that is done using the BAT token, which runs on the Ethereum blockchain. So BAT is using crypto only from the point of view of making it a medium of exchange between advertisers and content creators. So actually BAT is a medium of exchange. Of course, the pricing and all, then they have very nice algorithms which do a lot of these calculations, but those don't have much to do with blockchain per se. Actually, you must remember, even in the Ethereum, the real magic happens in smart contracts. And actually, smart contracts don't really need a blockchain to run. And smart contracts are neither smart nor they are contracts. It's just a word which the people have started to use, but it doesn't really make much sense as a word per se. But yeah, Ethereum has something called the EVM, the virtual machine. And that is what makes sure that all the contracts and everything are run in a very unique way as compared to people running it individually on their servers. So actually, in many use cases, you may always wonder, what is the relevance of blockchain in this?
Right.
Here, of course, I'm more a purist. So I believe in the pure vision of things. So the Bitcoin white paper started with blockchain. It didn't use the word blockchain. It's a chain of blocks. And then it brought in the concept of proof of work. So according to me, the moment you move away from proof of work, you are not a blockchain anymore. I mean, just think about it, right? It is one white paper which defines things, says this is the meaning of proof of work, this is how it is done, and this is called a blockchain. Now, when you change that fundamental logic, how are you still calling it a blockchain? It is like, okay, cars are supposed to move on the road and take you from place X to place Y. Then somebody comes out of the way to make that car fly. But it's not a car anymore. Now it's a plane. You don't call it a flying car. That's silly. It's a plane, right? So similarly, what Ethereum is now doing by saying, okay, now we will no longer be proof of work, we will become proof of stake.
Correct.
Well, technically they're no longer a blockchain. So all the other mechanisms of consensus which has come, according to me, then they are no longer called as blockchain. They all become distributed ledgers. Nothing wrong, but they are no longer blockchain.
Because you are talking about proof of work versus proof of stake, can you just clarify this a bit? What is exactly proof of work and how is it different from proof of stake?
Sure. Yeah. So in proof of work, what is happening is every certain number of minutes, all the transactions that are going to be validated, they go into some kind of a memory pool, and then people called miners are going to run some kind of computational algorithms on top of that data to generate a nonce, which is like a number. And then that it is very easy to verify whether the number is correct or not. But generating the number takes a huge amount of computational power and electricity.
Okay.
So the first miner who gets that number is said to have mined the block. I'm oversimplifying, but the first guy broadcasts to the network, look, this is the answer and this is the data in the block. Everyone else verifies. If it is correct, they say accepted. They all start going to the next block. So proof of work depends upon your muscle. You have to work for every block. The miner is going to work for every block and then somebody gets the money out of it. And it is quite random. It's like you can never predict who will get it. You cannot even predict how much time it will take. Bitcoin on an average is supposed to take 10 minutes a block, but it is never 10 minutes. It is always more or less than that because that's the way calculations are. It's random. Proof of stake, on the other hand, is purely capitalist. The more number of coins you have, the more the chances that you are going to validate a block because you are owning a large number of coins. So it is presumed that it is in your interest to maintain the security of the system. So it is like you are rich, you have a lot of the coins, so you get to decide what gets validated. It's a good system. I'm not saying proof of stake is bad, but then proof of stake means it is no longer blockchain. So it is another kind of distributed ledger.
Okay, so basically the alpha, the ultra, uber superset would be distributed ledgers, of which blockchain would be a subset, and then blockchain, pseudo blockchains would be another subset.
I would say it's blockchain and then there are distributed ledgers.
Okay.
It's two completely different concepts. So blockchain may you will find a Bitcoin. Ethereum till today is a blockchain because it is using this proof of work. Litecoin and all the Bitcoin derivatives, so many of them, they all come under the blockchain category. I think everything else should be called as a distributed ledger because it isn't blockchain, because it is not using proof of work. See, I consider that white paper to be the Bible for this industry. So if that white paper has defined proof of work and has defined blockchain, if you are not following that, well, then you are a new religion. So give yourself another name. No? Call yourself a distributed ledger. Don't call yourself a blockchain. That's all I'm saying.
Right, makes a lot of sense. I can't think of a counter to this. It makes sense. So matlab agar when I talk about blockchain applications in a non-financial space also, those will also end up not being true blockchains, right?
Yes, they will all end up being distributed ledgers.
Distributed ledgers. So this whole concept of having a separate blockchain application, different applications of blockchain, interesting. I think it's easier to sell it that way, to tell people that...
You know what? Actually, that's what people think. But I've been in the blockchain industry since 2015. Abhi 6 saal ho gaye. Most of these use cases are still in POC. Abhi bhi wo proof of concept mein hi chal raha hai. Because at the end of the day, it is not making economical sense.
Correct.
You are saying, मैं उसके ऊपर KYC डालूंगा. Now, first of all, when you talk about KYC, do you realize that those are heavy records? I mean, suppose you are scanning someone's passport and putting it up on this blockchain. Do you realize how much data that consumes? Now, blockchain by nature means everything will get distributed to every node. So if there are 500 nodes, my passport ka electronic version is on 500 places. And you are suddenly putting on MBs and GBs of data onto the blockchain. But what's the point? What are you going to achieve with it?
Correct.
If you want to prove that the data has not been tampered with, you have to use a hash function. Why do you need a blockchain? Any software can handle a hash function. Hash function is ultimately mathematical. Hash functions were invented in the 1970s along with public key cryptography. They didn't need blockchain, right? Even today, when you use the digital signature to sign your income tax return or your company return as a CA, you know that. Where is the blockchain in there? There is no blockchain, right? You're just using some software to digitally sign using a private key. So blockchain किधर आया उसके अंदर? So similarly, when you talk about KYC, where is the blockchain having any relevance in this? A bunch of banks, or let's say the government organization who controls that data, would put it on a private database, which could be shared between few entities if you want, but it is never going to be a public database. So why do you need a blockchain? How does that make sense? So yes, people think it will make it easy to sell, but then if it was easy to sell, why isn't it selling? Why aren't other blockchain use cases, non-finance related, why are they not working? In fact, why don't you name one? Tell me one very successful non-financial use case.
That's true.
You want to then answer, right? Yeah, that's the problem. So, Jabardasti ke use case.
Correct.
Great eye opener, I think.
Yeah, this will be it. This will be
in this industry. I mean, very few people will be honest enough about it, because usually it is bad for our industry when we say this. But come on, how long can we continue dreaming of something which is never going to work?
Correct, because whenever I talk to somebody who calls themselves as a blockchain consultant, or a who promotes blockchain, or a blockchain expert, they always tell me ki blockchain ka there is so much of variety of applications, etc. But I think that makes sense for them to sell their services. If they have a lot of places where they can sell that application, they'll have a lot of consulting assignments. And as long as a consulting assignment drags, McKinsey, Bain people will realize this, the more money they make. So
I don't want to take specific names of consulting agencies, but yeah, okay, I get what you're trying to say. So while it may be good for a blockchain consultant to say this, I'm not saying all of them do this, so please don't take out your anger on me. But honestly speaking, I personally don't think any of these non-financial use cases will ever make sense on the blockchain. Wow. Or on distributed ledgers for that matter. One very interesting thing what's happening is if you look at what Corda is doing. So Corda realized that they started off as a blockchain project. They were honest enough to admit that Corda is not a blockchain. It's not even a distributed ledger. It is actually a very different kind of a solution. So they made this really nice Java platform, and which can now be used. So even if there are 20 banks part of a network, but when a transaction is flowing between two banks, then only those two banks can see the data, not the other 18 banks who are part of the same network. Now that's a brilliant solution for the banking industry. And Corda is honest enough to not call it blockchain or even distributed ledger. It's a different solution. So that makes sense. So while they may have originally gotten inspiration from it, they've completely moved into a different direction. Most other people don't admit that, and they keep trying to get these use cases. But no, it doesn't make sense. See, KYC is working pretty well. You can now simply make it better and more efficient, but putting blockchain into it is not going to help. Putting it into voting, a lot of people, like, for the first time when I heard it, I also said, like, wow, this is interesting, because for me, ideally in the long run, you should be able to vote from your cell phone.
True.
You should not have to be forced to step out. Now, if this lockdown continues till, say, 2024, when we have elections in our country again at the central level, how will we go and vote? Now, by that time, if we are able to do it through a phone, because we already all have Aadhaar numbers, our Aadhaar numbers are already connected to our cell numbers.
Correct.
So it should not be very difficult to enable this kind of voting. Blockchain won't really solve anything here. Blockchain makes it more dangerous, because now you'll be able to probably see who's voting for whom.
Absolutely.
It may be possible to make more anonymization using the Aadhaar stamp. Of course, I'm not an expert on that. I'm just sort of giving my best estimate on that.
Yeah, right, absolutely. And whenever you think of solving problems structurally and taking to the masses, all of the technology that is coming up should enable people to take individual actions instead of taking actions in groups, right? Collecting poll booth ek hai, wahan pe jao, it's super inefficient, right? You can sit at your home and just at the click of a button vote for whoever you want to. Maybe you can have a lot of
we may actually see 100% voting after that. Suddenly everybody will vote, because now you have no friction, right?
Absolutely. And you get so much, you can get so many insights there. There can be companies doing data analytics, organizations, NGOs doing analytics around each of the person's profile, etc., whoever is standing in the elections. So much can be done. Absolutely. I'm getting application ideas for
I think Mark Zuckerberg spoke about this, that he envisions Facebook's future to be something like this. And while we're on Facebook, Rohas would love to know your thoughts on Facebook's currency, which is Libra.
Sure. So actually the project started out as Libra a few years ago, and then they announced it with a lot of partners, including I think the MasterCard, Visa, PayPal, so many people. But the moment they announced it, they got such a serious backlash from the regulators that one by one, all the partners moved out. Subsequently, Facebook then renamed that project to DIEM, and said that, okay, no longer will it be like a full-fledged currency, but it will be something like a stable coin. But then subsequently, they even rolled it. I mean, they reduced that also. And now it's finally probably just going to be one stable coin being issued by a regulated entity. So I would say that what that experiment has proven to us, that the regulators will not permit a private entity like Facebook to come with its own crypto. And I'm not against that idea. It makes sense to me because honestly, I would be very scared if companies start to run our money. See, the government at the end of the day still has some level of accountability to us because we elect them in. And plus the government is us, right? Tomorrow you could become the prime minister or president of your country. So it's our government. But the moment you look at companies, they only owe an explanation to shareholders. Correct. And shareholders at the end of the day mainly are only concerned with profit. Yeah. So it would be a very scary situation if they started to issue money. Fortunately, that's not happening for now at least.
Absolutely.
But then a far more scary thing is happening where countries are talking about central bank digital currencies. Now that actually scares me a lot because, see, today's world, when the government wants to demonetize, there's a lot of friction. So the government says, okay, this note is demonetized and a new one is coming. Well, then there's a huge amount of friction for the government also to print new notes and all. But in a CBDC, the government can set an expiry date on your money. And that's happening in China. So when you look at their experiments, they can put an expiry. So when they say this money is yours, they will say spend it in 3 months. Otherwise, the money disappears.
Whoa.
Now, that is a concept which was never there in the world, right? In the old ages, we had gold, silver, whatever. It was with us. So we could hold on to it. Government couldn't suddenly say it is not valuable anymore. That came with paper money. See, today no government can say the value of gold is zero. Because they can't control the value of gold, but they can control the value of paper currency or even your e-money. But now imagine in a CBDC where they can put an expiry on your money. So if the government now wants more spending to happen in the economy, they'll say 6 months limit. If they want more saving to happen, they will say 3 years limit. But that is so unfair. I'm working hard to earn that money. I'm paying so much of tax on it. After that also, I have no control over that money. I'm being forced to sell it off within a particular period of time. Then they could also say, you know what, 20% of your money has to be spent on clothes. I mean, that could also start, right? All sorts of rules and regulations can be put in. So I am completely not in favor of CBDCs. They would be nightmares if they actually come into the picture.
I mean, CBDCs along with normal currency where you have, say, 10% of CBDC, 90% of paper money could make sense.
It starts with 10, but then one day it will become 100. The point is, why should you have a CBDC? Why? I mean, what is the economic rationale? We already in India, for example, have this brilliant e-money system with UPI, NEFT and so many things.
Absolutely.
Money in India is already electronic. Let's leave it at that. The moment we move that onto a blockchain which gives central banks the rights to start putting expiry limits or how you can spend the money, I mean, that's it. That's the end of it. Yeah?
And there will be even more incentive for a ruling government to influence the central banks that are there. They won't be able to...
Especially in non-democracies.
Yeah.
I mean, you can imagine what all would happen, right?
My expression gave out whatever I wanted to say on this. But even in democracies, the independence of institutions are always questioned. And we should keep questioning that, right? That is what keeps us on our feet. But it would be, absolutely. I think this is not something that even we covered in some of the pieces that we wrote on CBDC. Maybe we'll just add this Rojas insights in there.
This is a Black Mirror episode waiting to happen.
No, I'm actually very happy with, in fact, RBI is against cryptocurrencies and I'm totally with them on it. I mean, just look at what is happening. A lot of people say that without a strong crypto sector, Indian economy will not reach 5 trillion. Now, that kind of a statement also does not make any sense to me. Tell me, how would buying Dogecoin or Shibu coin help my country's economy to become 5 trillion? Just think about it.
Absolutely right.
What logical economic rationale is it giving? Other than giving you a new way of gambling with your money, but you already have horse racing available. Lottery tickets are there. You can go online and play Rummy and other games if you really want to gamble. Do we really need Shibu coin and Dogecoin to add to this gambling? There is no level of, there is no logic in this statement, right? And then we look at it, there is no way to monitor KYC. There is no way to monitor anti-money laundering, countering the financing of terrorism. There's no way to do all this. So why should the RBI or the government even allow cryptocurrencies like this? I understand India has to take this in a different way. We are a different country. The kind of issues that our country faces is very different from the kind of issues the US or other advanced progress country rather would probably have. So we should not look at the West. We should not look at countries like Japan and Singapore and try to follow their logic. We have to look at India as India. And I'm totally with the government and RBI when it comes to cryptocurrencies. I get what they're trying to do. So the crypto industry also needs to realize that maybe, the government should make it that only HNIs can do it. Like today, if you want to be an angel fund or you want to invest as an angel investor, it is not open to normal people. It's only for HNIs, certain people who meet a certain economic criteria. They are allowed to be part of those funds. Why can't that same logic be applied to cryptos? Should we really allow my maid, because she asked me this question that my son wants to invest in Bitcoin. So that really scared me. Or actually not Bitcoin, he obviously was talking about Dogecoin. And I was like, she has no clue. But she's ready to give a lot of her savings to her son who will now invest it into Dogecoin. I don't want that ever happening. In fact, I remember many years ago, I was at some event and one very elderly gentleman came up to me and said, I put my entire provident fund and my wife's provident fund into Bitcoin. Now I have got one number on a piece of paper. What do I do with this number? I could not believe it. He has put his entire life savings into a cryptocurrency, but he doesn't understand how cryptocurrencies work. He doesn't realize that that number that he's showing us is his private key. So if he shows it to somebody, that person could just siphon all his money off and nobody would understand. Do you want that to happen? Our country, our elders are not yet ready for these kind of things. We need to give them a few years to get comfortable, and maybe then it could probably become more legalized. So I wouldn't be surprised if the government outright bans it anytime in this year. I strongly think that's going to happen. And it probably should.
From my perspective, I think even if they ban it, don't ban it, SEBI, RBI, the government should work together and at least create some guidelines around it or a plan around it, that how are you going to educate the masses about it, because this is not something which is going away. This is the future. Blockchains are the future. Cryptos most probably are here to stay. How do we now educate the masses? Because we have a national financial education policy, NFEP. Why can't that be created and fast-tracked for this crypto world too? Right?
Sure.
What's your take on that?
Yeah, I'm sure. See, this education will begin. So the younger lot who are in school right now, people like my daughters and all, they're already learning and hearing about it. And over the next few years, when they start to earn money, they can start investing in crypto if they want. But as of today, the kind of things that are happening in crypto is also... Now, tell me, why is it that one person's tweet will move billions in a market? That is not a mature market at all, right? For the common man to get into.
True.
For whatever you say about the stock market, at least it's not that one random guy's tweets are going to bring the markets up and down. Fortunately, it is not that bad. But the crypto world runs like that, where so-and-so person has tweeted an emoji. And then people are now guessing what that emoji means. And based on that, prices will go up and down. You are asking for trouble when you try to keep promoting these kind of cryptos. Which government would want its people to invest like? And everywhere you go, what the media is also doing is the same thing. 5 places where you can buy Shibu coin. Why do you want people to start buying that? The media also probably doesn't care. I know they just keep giving you ways in which you can blow up all your money. And that's ultimately what is going to happen, right? Unless a crypto has some economic rationale, it is not going to last. How long will you keep fooling people?
Correct.
Some point of time is going to go bust.
Yeah, with their resources, they can read that white paper and maybe explain it simply. That's our whole agenda. That, come on. Why are we, with no resources at all, companies like Readon, FinShots, Financial Pandora, etc., doing this, and you with so much of financial resources at your disposal are not doing it, are not educating your masses? Because media was that fourth pillar always in a democracy.
And in fact, Germany has taken a very good legal approach where they're saying you can buy crypto, but only from licensed entities. So, entities who are already regulated, buy through them. So automatically KYC, AML, CFT gets taken care of. Because those are proper regulated entities.
Right.
Now in India, exchanges are not regulated.
Correct.
So option one is government would regulate exchanges and then they would make sure they follow all those processes. Or then option two, the government could say, you know what, only banks can sell it. Or then option three, they could put a new regulator who could possibly do this. But something has to happen. Something should happen.
Awesome. So we started with applications of blockchain. We ended up criticizing or supporting whatever stances different organizations are taking. But let's come back to some other applications of blockchain within this space. I think you were talking about one more, right?
So we spoke about BAT, the basic attention token. Then there is another one which I really like apart from BAT, which is called as the Theta. So that is a project about decentralizing the video delivery mechanism. So today video sharing is centralized. And in fact, one of the co-founders of YouTube is a part of this project, where they're trying to decentralize the whole video sharing network. Wow. Where people can actually host it and then spread it around. Something like what Filecoin is trying to do for data. Theta is doing something similar for video distribution. And they have their own token which is related to that. I mean, I'm a big fan of that token, but the price has really gone up a lot since January, so I don't know if it's a good investment anymore, but as a project, it makes sense. We also have something called VeChain, which is looking into this whole supply chain issue. So they've created this public blockchain which has IoT and supply chains and everything, put into one. That does make some sense. It is an interesting way to try to apply blockchains towards supply chain. So like this, there are quite a few good projects, but when projects like Dogecoin get media mentions, it actually reduces the seriousness of what the other crypto projects are trying to do. Correct. So then people just consider everything to be like, okay, it's just pure speculation. But no, there are a lot of good projects around which people should look at. So if you're looking at researching, I would strongly recommend read up more about BAT, Theta, VeChain, and Filecoin. These are some of the good, strong projects which are trying to solve real problems.
Right, and I think we could start covering some of these. Reading the white papers and maybe...
Yeah, in fact, that's a very good point. So I'm also actually planning to now do deep dives into one crypto at a time. So in fact, that is what I'm planning to do on Clubhouse, where I was thinking, every time we pick one crypto and then we actually go a little deep. We try to look at its performance in terms of liquidity, pricing. We try to understand the use case, look at the team, actually study the team and figure out, is this team relevant or not? Are they good? And that way people can start to make more informed decisions.
So Rohas, I would love to know your take on NFTs, because that is something we haven't touched upon during our series.
Sure. So I'm usually quite a big fan and I speak quite well of NFTs, but again, there are a lot of the silly things which are coming in. Like just yesterday, I read about an Italian sculptor who has sold an invisible statue. So it is nothing. It is like, you remember that story we read as children about the emperor's new clothes? It is like that. Right. So the sculptor has actually given a certificate saying that this piece of vacuum exists and somebody has paid a huge amount of money for that. So when I hear things like this, then I begin to realize that, okay, basically they've killed the NFT market, because now nobody takes NFTs seriously. People are selling all kinds of weird things in the name of NFT, and I think already it is being said 90% of NFT transactions are over because the NFT sector has collapsed because it was just a bubble. How long can you sell these kind of stuff? Like, I mean, somebody paying $65 million for a digital thing, no matter how good it is, it's ultimately simply an electronic image which can be copied. So it's not like a painting which is difficult to copy. So when you take a real painting of a Picasso or M.F. Hussain or Leonardo da Vinci, it's not easy to just copy it and make a replica. But when something is digital, anybody can make a replica. So is it really worth paying that kind of money? Can you further monetize a 65 million piece of digital art? I don't think so. So how do we expect people to actually pay for it? Yes, there was a time when Bitcoin was also treated like a joke. But you know what? It took many years and so many people to bring Bitcoin to a certain level where everybody in the world now seriously looks at it. But that's one Bitcoin. Can you imagine hundreds of NFTs all becoming good in the long run and increasing in value? Do we think that $65 million people art is now going to become 70 million? Or do you think that invisible sculpture is now going to become more valuable? No, I don't think so. So honestly speaking, I believe the media as well as some people have completely killed the concept of NFT. So I have now decided not to even speak about that concept anymore. It's completely lost its value for most people.
Right.
Where did you see the value? I'm very curious to know.
Sure. So where I saw the value was that, so I divide NFTs into 3 types. So one is an intellectual property, like a copyright of a book. So let's say I've written this book. Anybody can go and buy this book and read it, but they cannot monetize the book. So I can sell a license as an NFT which says, now you have the rights to translate this book into Spanish, sell it and make money. That would be an NFT which makes sense. A non-fungible token which actually gives you intellectual property licenses. Second could be NFTs which are like game tokens. So, inside a game, you can win things like extra lives, swords, guns, weapons. If I've made a lot of those, why can't I sell it to somebody else? I can. That's another brilliant use case for NFTs, where I can sell those tokens or those virtual games to somebody else. People are there today who are creating virtual furniture, virtual clothes for using in multiverses. Brilliant use case.
Absolutely.
See, many people are not happy with their real home or real life. So they go and create an alternative persona on a platform. And there you can go and spend on clothes and this thing makes sense. But that's what made sense. But an invisible statue doesn't make any sense to me. So I believe those kind of NFTs make sense where there is actually some benefit. What benefit can anyone get from an invisible statue? It doesn't exist.
I had a maybe a conspiracy theory or whatever, where earlier people used to use all of these paintings and highly valuable artifacts to launder money, right? Move around money from one country to another. Could NFTs be used to do that?
For money laundering?
Yeah,
they could. So yes, I mean it's not just a conspiracy theory. Yes, there have been many cases where it's proven that certain art is actually being used for money laundering. And yes, that is something that could happen in NFT, that could happen anywhere. But when you are telling the whole wide world that I paid $65 million, there's a paper trail. So money has actually moved from one person's account to another, whether on Ethereum or whether in a bank account, but $65 million has actually moved. So that the regulator also knows that much money has been paid. So I don't know if that could be a money laundering deal. I don't think so.
Got it.
And again, when you look at the invisible statue, I don't think that could be money laundering because again, a price has been paid officially.
Absolutely, that did not make sense. We've thought of covering it, then we just left it there because it was like writing an invisible article on an invisible statue. You can read it, but you can't read it.
So I think, unfortunately, and then a lot of people want to set up NFT platforms today. My advice to them would be don't. Because the way it's going, I think, okay, NFT may have created the buzz, but you know what? I don't see the economic benefit. Like now so many exchanges have started their NFT exchanges. But when I go there and I look at that art, I really don't understand why I would buy it and why the price would go up in future. See, a CryptoKitties is a different story because it is not just about a piece of digital art. Correct. It is actually a program where you can breed cats. So it becomes like a fun interactive game. Makes sense. I think the Austrian Postal Services has come out with some stamp which has an NFT in it, and they are now coming out with the third version of it. Again, makes sense because I may be able to collect that postage stamp. So there is some collectible happening here. But for many of the NFTs, it makes no sense what you're getting.
Right.
I heard of this one NFT called the Bored Ape Yacht Club. I don't know if you've heard about this. So basically a bunch of apes, art based on apes, and apes are like fully clothes and styling and everything is done on that piece of art. And that is a token to a club. Now that club does a bunch of other activities and stuff.
Interesting. Like in fact, some people use NFTs for tickets. So, you have a lot of fake tickets, black marketing of tickets for, let's say, a football match and all that. So for that, they are now issuing tickets in the form of NFTs. Makes a lot of sense. So now your ticket is digital, but because it is on a blockchain, you cannot have duplicates. So the complete transparency is there. So that definitely makes sense. So there are good use cases, but these bad use cases sort of make everything else, people then just start thinking, no, the whole NFT thing is rubbish. And that really pains me. Because at the end of the day, I'm a developer. I build blockchain products. So when I hear about people thinking about my industry like this, it naturally makes me feel very bad.
And just thinking out loud, it could make sense in the lottery ticket ecosystem too, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
NFT's application in the lottery ticket ecosystem.
Absolutely.
Maybe that's up for disruption now.
Yeah. See, but then lotteries are very controlled. You need government licenses to run them. So in India, I think it is just 1 or 2 state governments who run it. So I don't think the blockchain would add value to them, to the process, when it is just a government issuing the ticket. But yeah, as we move on, if private lotteries ever begin and all, then definitely it makes sense that you put those lotteries on a blockchain. So the process is transparent.
Right, because even when it is controlled by government today, lottery tickets are used to convert black money to white money. I mean, that's a given case, that's a known. And yeah, if NFTs come into the picture, at least we'll be able to block that.
Yeah, sure.
Hopefully, I don't know.
If it's a government issued lottery ticket, they could use a private database to do the same thing. But I agree with you, instead of selling it on a piece of paper, which can very easily, because then nobody knows who's the owner of that paper.
Correct.
Whoever actually wins it could now sell it off to somebody else, and then the whole black money getting into white could happen. But if they were all digital in nature, then you wouldn't be able to do this, because then your name would be logged. That this ticket was bought by so-and-so. So if that ticket wins, only that person then gets paid.
Correct.
Sort of then you're doing what the IPO system does.
Correct. Matlab, you won't need a blockchain for it. Again, I'm confusing between these two. You won't need a blockchain in general. You'll just need to digitize it. Absolutely. Awesome. Great place for us to wrap this up. Sure. Thanks Rohas for doing this. We'll keep doing a lot of Clubhouse sessions or Leher sessions or whichever platform. We'll keep bringing you in for whatever questions we have around blockchains, cryptocurrencies, etc. Whatever is hot in these spaces, we'll keep buzzing you. Do share this video if you found this series interesting, and we'll put up all of the links in the comments of whatever jargon heavy things that we discussed. Stay tuned, read on.
Bye-bye.